there is a man you have probably walked past without ever really seeing him. He is somewhere past 40, maybe past 50. His hands are in the dirt. His knees ache in a way they did not used to. And to most people rushing by, he looks like he is just gardening, passing the time, keeping busy. But something is happening to that man that almost no one understands. While the rest of the world is staring into screens, chasing notifications, and wondering why they feel so tired all the time, this man is quietly doing something that researchers at Harvard, at the Mayo Clinic, and in long-term studies across the world have linked to living longer, thinking clearer, and feeling more at peace than men half his age. He is not taking a supplement. He is not following some expensive program. He is kneeling in the soil with his bare hands. And the strangest part is this. He probably could not explain to you why it works. He only knows that it does. He knows that on the days he spends in the garden, he sleeps deeper. He knows that the heaviness he used to carry into the evening lifts, somewhere between the weeding and the watering. He knows that out here, the noise in his head finally goes quiet. For most of his life, he was told that a man's worth was measured in what he produced. His title, his paycheck, his ability to push through exhaustion and never complain. And for decades he believed it. He gave his best years to rooms with no windows and meetings that changed nothing. Then one day, somewhere after 40, something shifted. Maybe it was a health scare. Maybe it was watching a friend his own age get a diagnosis no one saw coming. Maybe it was just the slow, quiet realization that he had been running for so long he had forgotten what he was running toward. And he found himself here, in the dirt, where the only deadline is the sunset, and the only thing asking anything of him is a row of seedlings that simply need water. What he did not know, what almost no man his age knows, is that this is not an escape from life. This is one of the most powerful things a man can do for his body and his mind in the second half of his life. The science behind it is real. The effects are measurable. And by the end of what I am about to share with you, you may never look at a patch of soil the same way again. Because the truth is simple, even if it sounds impossible. The men who work the earth with their hands after 40 are not just growing tomatoes and beans and flowers. They are quietly and without even trying, growing years back onto their own lives. So if you are a man past 40 or you love one, stay with me. What comes next is not about gardening the way you think of it. It is about what happens to a man's body the moment he crosses into the second half of his life, and why the soil may be the one thing modern medicine keeps forgetting to prescribe. Let me show you what almost no one will. To understand why the garden does what it does, you first have to understand what is quietly happening inside a man's body the moment he crosses past 40. Because something does change. Not overnight. Not in a way you can point to on a single morning. But slowly, beneath the surface, the body a man lived in for the first 4 decades begins to become a different body. And almost no one tells him. Start with the muscle. After the age of 40, a man begins to lose muscle mass at a rate of roughly 1% per year. It sounds small. 1%. But left unchecked, that quiet erosion is why a man in his 60s can struggle to carry what he once lifted without a second thought. Doctors have a name for it. They call it sarcopenia. And here is the part they do not put on the posters in the waiting room. The single most effective thing that slows it down is not a pill. It is the steady, repeated, low-intensity movement of using your body against gentle resistance. Bending, lifting, kneeling, carrying, digging. The exact movements a man makes when he tends a garden. Then there is the heart. After 40, a man's cardiovascular system becomes less forgiving. Blood pressure tends to creep upward. Arteries lose a little of their flexibility. The risk that was theoretical in his 30s becomes real. And study after study has found that moderate, sustained physical activity, the kind that keeps a man moving for hours without ever exhausting him, is among the most protective things he can do for his heart. Not the punishing workout, not the sprint, the long, slow, purposeful afternoon of staying in motion. Again, the garden. But the changes after 40 are not only in the muscle and the heart. They are in the blood itself. This is the decade when insulin resistance often begins its slow climb. When the body starts handling sugar a little less gracefully than it used to. When the seeds of type 2 diabetes, planted quietly over years, begin to take root. And physical activity, especially the gentle, regular kind, is one of the most powerful tools a man has to keep his blood sugar steady. Every hour spent moving in the garden is an hour his body is using fuel the way it was designed to. And then there is the part almost no one talks about. The hormones. After 40, a man's testosterone begins a slow, gradual decline. With it can come a quiet fog, lower energy, a dimming of drive, a sense that the sharpness he once had has softened at the edges. It is not weakness. It is biology. But here, too, the research points somewhere surprising. Regular physical activity, exposure to natural sunlight, better sleep, and lower stress have all been shown to support a man's hormonal health as he ages. Sunlight, movement, rest, calm. You are beginning to see the pattern. Because everything the aging male body quietly begins to need after 40, the garden happens to provide. Not as a treatment, not as a prescription, but as a way of living that the modern world has nearly forgotten. Think about how a man over 40 is told to take care of himself today. Sit in a clinic, swallow a pill on a schedule, maybe drive to a gym filled with mirrors and machines, and the faint sense that he no longer belongs there. All of it disconnected, all of it transactional, all of it feeling somehow like one more obligation in a life already full of them. Now picture the alternative. A man steps out into the morning air. The sun is on his face before the day has made any demands of him. He kneels and his muscles engage. He digs and his heart works. He moves slowly for an hour, then 2, and his blood sugar settles. He breathes deeply, and the cortisol that has been quietly poisoning his sleep begins to drain away. He is not exercising. He is not following a regimen. He is simply living in a way that happens to align, almost perfectly, with everything his body is asking for in the second half of his life. This is why the man in the garden ages differently. Not because he found some secret, but because, without ever planning it, he stumbled into a way of moving through his days that works with his biology instead of against it. And the most remarkable thing is that his body knows it. Long before he could explain any of this, his body was already responding. The deeper sleep, the steadier mood, the quiet return of an energy he thought was gone for good. His body understood what the science is only now catching up to. That after 40, a man does not need to fight his own aging in a war he cannot win. He needs to come back to the ground. But the body is only half of the story. Because what the garden does to a man's mind, to the very thoughts he carries and the weight he has been holding for years, may be even more powerful than what it does to his muscles and his heart. There is a bacterium living in healthy soil. Its name is Mycobacterium vaccae. You cannot see it. You have never thought about it. And yet, when a man pushes his bare hands into the earth, this tiny organism enters his body through his skin and the air he breathes, and something quietly extraordinary begins. Researchers studying this bacterium found that it triggers the release of serotonin in the brain. Serotonin, the same chemical that antidepressants spend billions of dollars trying to influence. The soil, it turns out, has been doing it for free since the beginning of time. Scientists have called this organism a natural antidepressant. Men have been kneeling in it for thousands of years, walking away calmer and lighter, never once knowing why. The earth itself was treating them, and they had no idea. But the soil is only the beginning of what the garden does to a man's mind. Consider what most men over 40 are quietly carrying. Decades of stress that never fully switched off. A nervous system that learned, somewhere along the way, to stay braced. The body of a man in his 50s often holds cortisol the way an old engine holds heat, long after the work is done. And chronic cortisol is not harmless. It disrupts sleep. It raises blood pressure. It clouds the mind. Over years, it wears a man down from the inside. Now watch what happens in the garden. Studies measuring cortisol have found that time spent gardening lowers it significantly. Not slightly. Significantly. A man can walk into his garden tense, wound tight from a life that asked too much, and walk out an hour later with his stress chemistry measurably changed. His body does this on its own. He simply has to show up and put his hands in the dirt. Then there is the mind itself. The thinking. After 40, a man begins to worry about a different kind of decline. The word he is most afraid of. The slow fog he watched take his own father or grandfather. And here the research offers something close to hope. Long-term studies following thousands of people found that those who gardened regularly had a meaningfully lower risk of developing dementia. Some studies put the reduction at a level no pill has ever matched. Why would digging in the dirt protect the brain? Because the garden asks the mind to stay alive. It demands planning, timing, memory, patience, problem solving, when to plant, when to prune, why one bed thrives and another struggles. A garden is a puzzle that never fully resolves, and a brain kept busy solving it stays sharper longer. But perhaps the deepest thing the garden gives a man's mind is the one thing the modern world has stolen from him. Quiet. Think about the inside of a man's head after 40. The replaying of old mistakes. The worry about money, about health, about people he loves and cannot protect. The constant low hum of a mind that does not know how to stop. For many men, that noise has been running so long they no longer notice it. They just feel tired in a way sleep does not fix. The garden interrupts it. Not by force, by absorption. When a man's full attention goes to the gentle work in front of him, the seedling, the soil, the slow turning of the season, there is simply no room left for the noise. Psychologists have a name for this state. They call it flow. The complete absorption in a task that quiets the anxious, self-focused parts of the mind. And the garden produces it naturally, the way few things in modern life can. This is why so many men describe the garden in almost spiritual terms, even when they would never use that word. They say it is the only place their mind goes still. The only place they feel like themselves. The only place where, for an hour or two, they are not failing at anything, not behind on anything, not bracing for anything. They are just a man in the dirt, with the sun on his back and a living thing in his care. And here is what the science and the soul agree on. A calm mind is not a luxury for a man over 40. It is medicine. Lower stress means lower blood pressure. Better sleep means a stronger heart and a sharper memory. A sense of peace means a body that is not constantly flooded with the chemistry of fear. The mind and the body are not two separate things. What heals one heals the other. So when that man kneels in his garden, the serotonin rising from the soil, the cortisol draining from his blood, the noise in his head finally going quiet, he is not escaping his life. He is repairing it. But there is one more thing the garden teaches a man. Something the science can measure but never quite capture. It is not about the body and not even about the mind. It is about who a man becomes when he learns to care for slow, living things in a fast and impatient world. A man who has lived past 40 has spent most of his life being told to go faster. Hit the deadline. Climb the ladder. Answer the message before the next one arrives. Speed was the measure of a good man. The faster he moved, the more he produced, the more he was worth. And so he learned to live like that, year after year, until urgency stopped feeling like pressure and started feeling like who he was. The garden refuses to play that game. You cannot rush a seed. You cannot demand that a tomato ripen on your schedule. You cannot shout at the soil to make it move faster. The garden operates on a clock older than any man, and it does not care about his calendar. For the first time in decades, a man finds himself in the presence of something that simply will not be hurried. And at first, this drives men crazy. They plant and they want results tomorrow. They check the bare soil each morning, impatient, certain something has gone wrong. But the garden teaches the lesson slowly, the only way it knows how. The seed becomes a sprout in its own time. The sprout becomes a plant. And one ordinary morning, weeks later, the man walks out and finds the first tomato, red and heavy and real, hanging where there was once nothing but dirt and faith. Something shifts in him then. He begins to understand in his body, and not just his head, that some of the best things in life cannot be forced. They can only be tended, watered, protected, and then waited for. This is a kind of wisdom the modern world cannot sell him. Patience. Not the gritted teeth patience of a man white-knuckling his way through a traffic jam, but the deep, settled patience of someone who has learned to trust a process he does not control. After a lifetime of trying to bend the world to his will, a man discovers there is a strange peace in tending something and then letting it be what it is. And with that patience comes something even rarer. Humility. A garden humbles a man. No matter how much he learns, the weather will surprise him. A frost will take what he loved. Pests will arrive uninvited. A bed that thrived last year will struggle this one for reasons he may never understand. The garden reminds him, gently and repeatedly, that he is not in charge. That he is a participant in something larger than himself, not the master of it. For a man who spent decades being told to control, to dominate, to win, this is not a defeat. It is a relief. He can finally set down the exhausting belief that everything depends on him. There is also responsibility, the quiet daily kind. The garden needs him. Not dramatically, not urgently, but faithfully. The plants do not care how he feels that morning, whether he slept, whether his knees ache, whether the news was bad. They need water. They need tending. And in showing up for them, day after day, a man rediscovers something he may have lost when the career wound down or the children grew and left. He is needed. He matters to something living. His presence makes a difference that he can see with his own eyes. This is no small thing for a man over 40, because this is often the season when a man begins to wonder what he is still for. The roles that defined him are changing or ending. The world that once demanded so much of him has, in some ways, stopped asking. And into that quiet, dangerous space, where too many men lose their sense of purpose entirely, the garden speaks up. It says simply, I need you tomorrow. Come back. And he does. Day after day, season after season, the man and the garden shape each other. He gives it his time and his care. It gives him back his patience, his humility, his steadiness, his sense of being needed. He thinks he is growing vegetables, but the soil is quietly growing something in him, too. A slower, deeper, more grounded version of the man he used to be. The world will never put this on a billboard. There is no profit in telling men that the cure for so much of what aches in the second half of life is free, and slow, and waiting just outside the back door. There is no industry built on patience. No quarterly earnings in humility. No advertising budget for the peace a man finds when he stops trying to outrun his own life and kneels down to tend it instead. But the men who find it know. They cannot always explain it. They just know that they are steadier than they used to be. Calmer, more themselves. They know that the garden gave them something the working world never did, even after all those years of giving the working world everything they had. It gave them back to themselves. And once a man has that, once he has rediscovered who he is in the quiet and the soil, something in him naturally turns outward again, toward the people he loves, toward the ones who will come after him. Because a garden, in the end, was never really meant to be tended alone. There is a moment that comes to many men who garden, and it almost always takes them by surprise. They are out there alone, as usual, doing the slow work. And without deciding to, they find themselves thinking of someone. A father who grew tomatoes along a fence line decades ago. A grandmother whose hands were always in the dirt. A childhood summer half forgotten, the smell of soil and cut grass, a time before life got heavy. The garden has a way of reaching back through the years and placing a man, gently, in the long line of people who worked the earth before him. Because this is older than him. Far older. Every man who has ever knelt in the soil to coax food and beauty from the ground is part of something that stretches back to the very beginning of who we are. For nearly all of human history, this is what people did. They tended the land. They watched the seasons. They passed the knowledge from weathered hands to young ones. And a man over 40, kneeling in his own small plot, is quietly rejoining that ancient procession. He is not doing something new. He is doing the oldest thing there is. And that connection does not stay in the past. It reaches forward too. Watch what happens when a child enters a man's garden. A grandchild perhaps, or a neighbor's curious kid, or his own son grown and visiting. The man who could barely get a teenager to look up from a screen suddenly has their full attention, because there is a worm in the soil, or a strawberry to be picked, or a seed to be pressed into the ground by a small hand guided by his own. Something passes between them in that moment that no lecture ever could. Not just knowledge, presence, the simple, powerful experience of an older man and a younger one, side by side, making something live. This is how it was always meant to happen. The old teaching the young, not with words, but with dirt under the fingernails and patience in the afternoon sun. A man over 40 has something the world desperately undervalues. He has time lived, lessons earned, a way of being steady that only comes from years. And the garden gives him a place to pass it on, quietly, the way the best things are always passed on. But the giving does not stop with people he knows. A garden is by its nature generous beyond its keeper. The man grows more tomatoes than he can eat, and so they go to a neighbor. The squash multiplies, and suddenly he is the man on the street who leaves vegetables on doorsteps. He learns the names of people he never spoke to before, connected now by the simple act of sharing what the earth gave him. In a season of life when many men quietly grow isolated, when the old work friendships fade and the calendar empties out, the garden pulls him gently back into community. Not through obligation, through abundance. And there is something even deeper here, something that touches the question every man eventually faces as he moves through the second half of his life. The question of what he leaves behind. A man plants a tree, knowing he may never sit in its full shade. He nurtures soil that will outlast him, soil that will feed people whose faces he will never see. He teaches a grandchild to garden, and one day, long after he is gone, that grown child will kneel in the dirt and feel his presence in the work of their own hands. The garden is one of the few places where a man can plant something that continues past the boundary of his own life. It is a quiet rebellion against the fear that nothing we do will last. This is the part the science cannot measure, though it tries. Studies will tell you that men with strong social connection live longer, that a sense of purpose adds years to life, that people who feel part of something larger than themselves are healthier in body and mind. All of that is true, and all of it is happening in the garden. But the man kneeling there is not thinking about studies. He is thinking about the boy who will inherit this plot, the neighbor who loved last summer's beans, the father whose hands he can still feel guiding his own. He is, without ever naming it, weaving himself into the lives around him and the years ahead of him. He is refusing to let the second half of his life be a slow withdrawal from the world. Instead, he is putting down roots, deeper than ever, into the people and the place and the living things he has chosen to care for. And that, in the end, may be the real reason these men live longer. Not only the movement, though it strengthens the body. Not only the soil, though it calms the mind. But the fact that a man who tends a garden has given himself a reason to be here tomorrow. Something that needs him. Someone to share it with. A line that runs from the hands that taught him to the hands he is teaching now. He has given himself a future. And a man with a future, a real one, with purpose and people and living things in his care, is a man whose body has every reason to keep going. Which brings us back to where we began. To that man you might have walked past without ever really seeing him. Let me tell you what he knows now. That man kneeling in the soil. The one the world rushes past without ever really seeing. By now you understand him differently than you did a few minutes ago. He is not passing the time. He is not just keeping busy. He is doing, quietly and without applause, one of the most complete things a man can do for himself in the second half of his life. He is moving his body in the way it was built to move. He is calming a mind that spent decades braced against the world. He is breathing in something from the soil that lifts him in ways he cannot name. He is practicing patience and humility and care. He is staying connected to the people he loves and the ones who will come after him. He is giving himself every single day a reason to return. And his body knows it. It rewards him with deeper sleep, steadier moods, a heart that works a little easier, a mind that stays a little sharper. The years that the studies talk about, the longer life, the lower risk, the better aging. Those years are not a prize handed to him from somewhere far away. They are growing right there in the garden, alongside everything else he tends. Here is what I want you to take from all of this. If you are a man past 40, you have probably been told, in 100 quiet ways, that the best part of your life is behind you. That from here it is mostly decline. Management of symptoms. A slow letting go. The world has a way of writing men off once they are no longer climbing, no longer producing at full speed, no longer young. The garden tells a different story. It says that the second half of a man's life can be the richest. Slower, yes, but deeper. Quieter but more meaningful. It says that strength does not have to vanish, that purpose does not have to fade, that a man can grow more himself, not less, as the years go on. It says that the very things the modern world stripped from him, the stillness, the patience, the connection to living things and to the earth itself, are waiting just outside the back door, free for anyone willing to kneel down and begin. You do not need much. A small patch of ground. A few seeds. A little water and a little faith. You do not need to know what you are doing. The soil is patient with beginners. It always has been. The man who is an expert today was once a man standing over bare dirt, wondering if anything would ever grow. It will. That is the quiet promise the earth has kept for every generation of men who ever trusted it. You tend it and it gives back. You care for it and it cares for you in return, in ways that reach far beyond the vegetables and the flowers, all the way down into your body and your mind and the number of mornings you have left to enjoy them. So if there is a part of you, even a small part, that felt something stir while you listened, a memory of soil under your hands, a longing for something slower and more real, a quiet wish to feel like yourself again, do not ignore it. Go outside, find a little ground, and begin. The man you walked past was never just gardening. He was growing years back onto his own life, one season at a time. And the ground that gave them to him is waiting to do the same for you. It is not too late. It was never too late. The soil does not ask your age. It only asks that you show up. If this spoke to something in you, take a moment before you go. Tell me down in the comments. Are you already a man who works the earth, or are you ready to begin? I read every one. And if you want more stories like this one, stay a while. There is a whole life out here, waiting in the quiet for men who are ready to find it.